The tea had gone cold by the time my son-in-law finally left the kitchen. I didn't notice right away. I was sitting at the table, both hands wrapped around the mug, watching a sparrow land on the railing of the back deck. It sat there for a moment, tilted its head, then flew off. Just like that. No hesitation. No looking back. I thought, I want to be more like that bird. My name is Dorothy. I'm 67 years old, and I live in a 2-bedroom house in Ancaster, Ontario, the same house my late husband Gerald and I bought in 1989, the same year our daughter Claire was born. Gerald passed 11 years ago. A heart attack, sudden and quiet, the way he always preferred things to be. After he was gone, I rattled around this house for a while, learning what silence actually sounded like when it had no end to it. I kept the garden going. I kept the bird feeder full. I drove myself to my book club every second Thursday. And I made butter tarts from scratch every Christmas because Gerald's mother had taught me how, and I wasn't about to let that go. I was doing fine. Not happy in the way people mean when they say it lightly, but fine in the way that actually takes effort, the kind of fine you build, slowly, from what's left. Then my daughter called and said her husband had lost his job, and could they stay with me for just a little while. Claire is 42. Her husband, my son-in-law, is 45. I will call him my son-in-law, because that is all he is to me now, a title, not a feeling. His name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what he did with it. He was charming at first, the way certain men are the kind of charm that makes you feel chosen when he directs it at you, and confused when he suddenly doesn't. He'd grown up in Brantford, went to school for something in finance, never quite landed. Claire had been supporting them for years before the latest job fell through. I found this out gradually, the way you find out most things that have been kept from you in pieces, through the wrong conversations at the wrong times. They moved into the 2nd bedroom in March. Just temporarily, my son-in-law said. Just until we find our footing. He carried in 3 large duffel bags and one very expensive television he insisted on mounting on my bedroom wall before I quite understood what was happening. I stood in the hallway watching him drill into the plaster and told myself, this is what family does. You open the door. By April, he had a favorite chair. Mine. The wingback by the window where I do my crosswords in the mornings. He'd moved it slightly, just a few inches, so it faced the television instead of the garden. I moved it back. He moved it forward again. Neither of us said anything about it. We didn't need to. By May, he had opinions about the grocery budget. He'd found the folder I keep on the kitchen counter, just a simple accordion file where I tuck the monthly bills, the Costco receipts, the hydro statements. He went through it while I was at my Tuesday water aerobics class. I know because he left it open on the table at the wrong section, and the man has never once in his life put anything back where he found it. That evening he sat across from me at dinner and said, very casually, that I might want to think about refinancing. That there was equity in the house I wasn't using. That he knew a few people. I said I'd think about it. I had no intention of thinking about it. What I thought about instead, that night, lying in my own bed, listening to his television through the wall, the one he'd installed in my room and then apparently abandoned for the larger screen in the living room, was a conversation I'd had with my friend, Paulette, 2 weeks earlier. Paulette had been widowed a year before Gerald died. She was sharp in the way that grief sometimes makes people, and she'd sat across from me at Swiss Chalet and said, without preamble, Dorothy, do you know exactly where your money is? I thought I did. But Paulette made me write it down. Every account, every investment, the TFSA I'd been contributing to for 15 years. The joint account Gerald and I had kept at TD that was now fully in my name. The small RRSP I'd converted to a RRIF when I turned 65. My pension from the school board, where I'd worked as an administrative assistant for 22 years. I knew what I had. And I knew, sitting in that kitchen in May watching my son-in-law look at my filing system, that I needed to make sure he didn't. The next morning, after he'd left to take Claire to her dental appointment, I drove to the TD branch on Wilson Street and sat down with my advisor, a young woman named Priya, who had helped me before, and who did not ask unnecessary questions. I moved the bulk of my savings into a new account that existed only in my name at a different institution. I updated the contact information, removed the paper statements, and switched entirely to online notifications, which went to an email address my son-in-law did not know about and could not access. I was back home before lunch. I made myself a grilled cheese and ate it standing at the counter, looking out at the garden. I felt for the first time in 2 months like I could breathe all the way down. That should have been enough of a warning to me, the fact that I had to do those things at all. That a man sleeping under my roof, eating food from my refrigerator, had made me feel like my own finances were something to protect from him. That is not a feeling that comes from nowhere. That is a feeling that arrives with evidence. The evidence came in June. Claire had gone to visit her college roommate in Halifax for a long weekend. She did this every year, 3 or 4 days, just the two of them, catching up the way old friends do. I had always thought it was good for her, a chance to be herself outside of the roles she wore at home. That particular Friday, after she left, my son-in-law asked if he could borrow my car to visit a friend in Hamilton. I said yes. I handed him the keys. He came back 4 hours later. I didn't think much of it, but that Sunday, checking my account out of habit, I noticed a charge I didn't recognize. A restaurant in Niagara-on-the-Lake. $180. The date was Friday. He had not gone to Hamilton. I sat very still with my phone in my hands. The charge was on the household visa, the one I'd kept open for shared expenses while they were staying with me, the one I had not yet removed him from, because I had been too careful not to seem like I didn't trust him, because I had been performing the role of a woman who trusts her family. That was the last performance of that particular role. On Monday, I called Visa and removed him from the account entirely. I told them I was simplifying my finances and did not require a secondary cardholder. The woman on the phone said, "Of course, no problem," and it was done in 4 minutes. 4 minutes to close a door I should have closed months earlier. On Tuesday, I called my lawyer. Her name is Susan Almeida, and she has handled my affairs since Gerald died. She is calm and practical, and does not fill silences unnecessarily, which I appreciate. I told her what was happening. I told her about the refinancing suggestion, the account access, the Niagara charge. I told her I wanted to review my will, update my power of attorney, and understand exactly what my rights were as a homeowner with family members occupying the property. Susan listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Dorothy, I'm going to send you a tenant notice package and an updated POA form. You need to establish a paper trail." I said, "How long do I have?" She said, "That depends on how long you'd like this to take." I thought about the wingback chair, the television in my wall, the accordion file left open on the wrong section. I said, "I'd like it to take as little time as possible." Claire came back from Halifax on Sunday evening. She looked rested in the way she only ever looked when she'd been away, her shoulders down, her jaw unclenched. She hugged me in the kitchen and said she'd missed me. I hugged her back and meant it completely. Whatever was coming, I did not want it to come for her. I had been very careful to make sure it wouldn't. The next 2 weeks were ordinary on the surface. My son-in-law made his coffee in the mornings. He sat in my chair. He watched his programs. He made calls in the backyard sometimes, walking back and forth along the fence line in a way that I found myself watching from the kitchen window without meaning to. He mentioned the refinancing again at dinner one Wednesday, more directly this time. He had printed something out, an article, it looked like, or maybe a brochure, and he set it next to my placemat with a kind of deliberate casualness that I recognized from years of watching people present things they've already decided. I looked at the paper. I nodded slowly. I said, "I'll have my lawyer take a look." Something shifted in his expression. Just briefly, he picked up his fork. That night, after Claire had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and wrote down everything I had done since May: the account transfer, the visa removal, the meeting with Susan, the letter she had drafted and I had signed, addressed to both of them, officially establishing the terms of their stay and the timeline for their departure 60 days, as required under Ontario tenancy guidelines, for a shared dwelling situation. The letter was in a sealed envelope in my filing cabinet, behind the section marked Utilities. I had not delivered it yet. I was waiting for the right moment. Not for drama, not for a confrontation. I don't have any interest in those things. I was waiting because I had learned, in 67 years, that timing is a form of dignity, yours or someone else's, and I wanted this to end with as much of it intact as possible. The right moment came on a Saturday morning in August. I had been up since 6. I'd made tea, watered the front planter boxes, and was sitting in my chair, by the window with the crossword, when my son-in-law came downstairs. He poured his coffee. He looked at me in the wingback, and something in his face registered that I was there, in that spot, as if the fact of it surprised him, as if he'd already reassigned that corner of the room in his mind. He sat down at the table with his phone. After a few minutes, he said, without looking up, "I've been talking to someone at a mortgage brokerage about your situation." I set down my pen. He said, "There's a product that would let you access the equity without monthly payments. It's called a reverse mortgage. A lot of seniors use it." A lot of seniors, I thought. I said, "I'm familiar with what a reverse mortgage is." He said, "I just think you're sitting on something valuable that isn't working for you." I said, "What makes you think it isn't working for me?" He didn't have an answer for that. He looked back at his phone. I finished my crossword. I got up, rinsed my mug, and went to the filing cabinet in the hallway. I came back with the envelope. I set it on the table next to his coffee. He looked at it. He looked at me. I said, "That's from my lawyer. Take your time reading it. If you have questions, you can call her directly. Her number is on the letterhead." I went upstairs. I heard him open it. What followed was not a scene, exactly. He came up to find me 20 minutes later, and there was a conversation, raised voices at certain points, mostly his, in which several things were said about gratitude and family and what I supposedly owed them. I stood in the doorway of my bedroom and let him finish. I did not raise my voice. I had made a decision some weeks earlier that I would not raise my voice. It felt important to stick to that. When he was done, I said, "The 60 days starts today. I'd like you to plan accordingly." He left the room. He slept on the couch that night. He slept on the couch for several nights after that. Claire came to me the following morning. She sat at the kitchen table and she cried, which I expected, and I sat across from her and let her, which was the only right thing to do. After a while, she said, "Mom, did you know this was coming?" I said, "I've known something was coming since the accordion file." She was quiet. I said, "I love you. This isn't about you, but I've worked for 35 years to have this house and this life, and I won't sign it over to someone who sees it as an opportunity." She said, "He's not a bad person." I said, "Maybe not, but he hasn't been a careful one either." She nodded, eventually, slowly, the way people nod when they're agreeing with something they'd rather not agree with yet. They were gone by the second week of October. Claire found them a rental apartment in Waterdown, a 2-bedroom first floor with a small yard. She called me after they moved in and we talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular, and at the end she said, "I'm glad you're okay, Mom." I said, "I'm more than okay." That was true. I didn't say it to reassure her. I said it because I meant it in a specific way that I couldn't quite explain yet but was starting to feel all the way through. The first thing I did after they left was move my chair back to its exact original position, 3 inches to the right, angled slightly away from the television and toward the window. I sat in it with a cup of tea and looked out at the backyard, where the maple was just starting to turn and the bird feeder needed refilling. I drove to Paulette's that Saturday, and we sat on her porch with coffee and shared a butter tart I'd made that morning. She didn't know everything that had happened. I told her some of it. She listened the way she always does, without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Did you sleep last night?" I said, Better than I have in 6 months, she said. Then you made the right call. I think about that sometimes. The idea of a right call. Like there's a single moment where you decide to stop letting something happen to you. I don't think it's ever one moment, actually. I think it's dozens of small ones: moving your chair back, calling Priya at TD, sitting with Susan Almeida, and saying out loud what you've been thinking quietly for weeks. I think by the time the envelope was on the table, the decision had already been made 100 times over. The envelope was just the last one. The maple is bare now. It's November, and the yard looks the way it always looks this time of year: cleaned up, quiet, ready for whatever comes next. I bought a new teapot last week. Ceramic, dark blue, bigger than I need for just one person. I saw it at a little shop on Ottawa Street and I thought, yes, that one. I carried it to the car and drove home and made a full pot immediately, just because I could. And I sat in my chair with the crossword and drank 3 cups and watched the light change in the garden. No one moved anything. No one had opinions about what I should do with what I've built. It was, I thought, a very good Saturday. It was, I realized, just the beginning of them.